of it too. But I'm here to learn more about it, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jay Elvove. I'm on the board of Docs in Progress. We're a small nonprofit in Silver Spring that works with documentary filmmakers to provide them with venues to show their films. Not many venues available at this point in time. So we, like everybody else, pivoting to online. I'm fairly familiar with cybersecurity. My career was in IT. I worked at University of Maryland for 36 years, providing infrastructure support at various levels of capacity, but I'm always interested in what's happening because things change really fast in this industry.
Great. All right, we'll have Bobby followed by Colleen.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Bobby with Baby Proof in Montgomery. We're a full-service child-proofing company in the DC region, creating safer homes for infants and toddlers. To the extent of cybersecurity, I can set up a home network pretty easily, wired or wireless. But beyond that, I'm pretty much depending on the built-in software, Windows Defender and kind of stuff for the security aspect of it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Colleen Stribbe with Connect, Develop, Succeed. I help people get the most out of their networking. And I will say still a novice on the cybersecurity. I know enough to be dangerous, and that's not a good thing.
All right, Steve followed by Kim.
Steve Robinson, Comcast Business, Senior Business Account Executive. We do sales, internet, phone, and TV. And I am an absolute expert on cybersecurity. Just kidding. No, I know nothing about it.
Kim, do you want to introduce yourself? She must have stepped away for a second. All right, so we'll do Chris and then Joseph. All right, maybe just Joseph.
I'm here, sorry.
Oh, perfect. Kim, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sorry, I had to walk my dog. He's only got 3 legs, so he had to go to the bathroom, sorry.
Oh.
Sorry, so I am Kim Coates. I'm with Mid-Atlantic Media, and we are a publishing company here in Rockville and Baltimore area. We have Jewish newspapers, as well as niche parenting pubs, home services magazines, as well as Baltimore Style, Consumer's Eye. And what I do is I sell the advertising for those publications.
Wonderful. All right, and Joseph put a message in the chat, so he doesn't have a microphone, but it's Joseph Barone with A Fool for Learning. So it's a company that focuses on training and learning for small to medium-sized organizations. And he's pretty comfortable with cybersecurity. All right, so who do we have left? I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, but Musa? All right, so we'll go then to Tom, who just joined us. Tom, if you'd like to introduce yourself, your name and company, and just very briefly how comfortable you are with cybersecurity.
Hey guys, my name's Tom Dow. I represent 3Cs, a boutique of creative services from visual, audio, creative strategy, original music. And I guess depending upon this this meet, I'll tell you how comfortable I am.
Wonderful. All right, and then Camilla, if you want to introduce yourself quickly.
Sure. I'm cheating a little bit because I'm with DI, so I feel like I've been learning a lot about cybersecurity since I joined. But I'm really excited about everyone, to see the presentation and learn what I've been learning since I've been working with Mark, who's just a wizard at cybersecurity.
Wonderful. All right, so then I'm going to turn it over to Julie and Jane to introduce themselves, and then they'll turn it over to digital industry.
Marilyn, Monica, Chris also sent a message on the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. So Chris Haas also does not have a microphone. So he's with Haas and Company, which is an accounting firm in Olney. And he says he's comfortable with cybersecurity because of help from JC in the past. So it's a great little plug.
And you have one more person who joined, Monica. Ron.
Hey there.
Hi, Ron. Welcome. If you'd like to introduce yourself quickly, just your name and company and how comfortable you are with cybersecurity.
I'm Ron Schwartz with Prime Lending. We're a mortgage company in Gaithersburg and actually owned by a bank nationally. And I'm not comfortable at all with cybersecurity, so I'm glad to be here, especially on James's invitation.
Perfect place to be. All right, now I'll turn it over.
Okay. Well, I'm Jane Rediker, and I'm president of the Greater Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce, and we're pleased to be able to co-host with our colleagues in Bethesda. We have some members in common, so we're pleased to be able to join you. And we also love Digital Industry. They're a great member. And Julie says she's got some plumbers working in the background, so I'm going to introduce her so that we don't get the noise from the background. Julie Polakowski, who is my expert in all things social media, marketing, and communication. So she's with us today as well and helps us promote all of our events, and as did this one. We're thrilled to be here today to present this. I'm actually thrilled to learn more. I'm very comfortable with my cybersecurity for the office because digital takes care of all that for us, so I don't have to worry about it. That said, I'm hoping to learn something about the cybersecurity in my house because I'm not so comfortable with that. And it's just like, okay, plug it in and plug in this extra extender and hope that it works. So thank you again. And thank you, Mark and JC, for putting this together for all of us today. We appreciate it. And I'll turn it over to you guys.
Well, thank you. My name is Mark Mazaris. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing the presentation, but also thank you to JC and Camilla, who are instrumental in helping to put all of this together and making sure that we're able to put together a good presentation. So I thank them both very much. I'm going to go ahead now and start sharing the presentation itself. So just a moment here. I'm going to click on my option to share. And you should now all be seeing the primary presentation. Now, feel free to stay available as far as if you're comfortable doing so with your cameras. As I spoke to a member of our staff the other day, who's a former radio personality here in the Washington area, Tucker Eccles. I said, Tucker, it must be really hard to do radio when you don't see your audience and you can't get any feedback. Because I've now done presentations where the cameras are all turned off and you're not seeing the audience. And I found it's really hard to project and create excitement when you're kind of talking into effectively a silent medium in that regard. So we're here to talk about cost-effective cybersecurity solutions for and in the office, and particularly remote work. And this year, I mean, every year I come back to this topic, and October is Cybersecurity Month. And think, wow, there's just so many things that we really need to be able to share with folks. And those come from the experiences. So let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then that process we'll also be able to tell you a little bit about some of those experiences that have happened over this past calendar year. So I am both the CEO and the CIO for Digital Industry. I have those two titles because I look at the business as when I'm working for the business or working on the business. When I'm working on the business, I am the CEO. When I'm working for my business, as we're a 15-person IT services company, and I still do actually work in my business, then I have the role of VCIO. And that is where I'm acting as a virtual CIO for my clients and being a technology leader in that respect. And you can see the different services that Digital Industry has expertise in. So our presentation overview is where I'm going to stop and talk a little bit about some of the experiences that Digital Industry has become aware of or participated in over this last year. And I find that the stories are very helpful in deriving not only lessons, but also where the need is present and how the need is created. And in my experience, a lot of small business owners fall into a category of, I don't need to do cybersecurity because I can't afford to. I don't need to do more with cybersecurity because I don't know what to do. I don't need to do cybersecurity because I'm a small business and who wants to break into anything I have anyway. I'm relying, I'm a small business and relying on anonymity in being in a very large pool, and nobody's going to find me anyway. So these are pick any one of those. They're very common answers I get when we talk about cybersecurity in the SMB market. And my responses for each one of those would be that one, you absolutely do have something that the cyber criminals are after, because over 80% of cyber attacks have only one goal, your money. And if you are a small business, I hope you have money. And you don't have to have vast quantities of money. I'm sure they would appreciate if your bank account had $500,000 in it versus 50,000 versus 5,000 or 500. But please rest assured that they're happy to take your $500 as well. And as they go into the process, they don't know if it's 50,000 or 500. So when they get there and it's 500, they're satisfied and they'll take that too. Anonymity unfortunately doesn't work because they're going to go after you with wide-ranging nets where they're going to try to pick up on you through your mistake. They are opportunists, and if you give them the opportunity, then they're happy to take advantage of that so that they can achieve their goals. Who are the folks that are doing these attacks? And that's the next thing that I always want to make sure everybody understands. There are certainly, kids who are becoming technically savvy, have learned skills, might be running around on websites that give them instructions, recipes of how to compromise systems in one manner or another. And there's an unending sea of those available online. Not only can I learn how to make the most delicious pico de gallo if I want to look around for recipes online, I can also go online and learn how to compromise various different types of computer equipment. And nowadays, computer equipment is prevalent everywhere. Your TV is probably an Android device. Your TV may or may not have a camera on it. Your TV may or may not have a microphone built into it. And then, of course, we come all the way back to devices like our laptops and our iPads and our telephones. And we know that these devices are competent in bidirectional communication. We're using them right now. So the next item that's so important to understand is there are an ever-growing amount of people who are doing the acting as cyber criminals all the way from a business level. That is to say, they have an office, they have conference rooms, they sit down together and work out how they're going to pull this off. It is not confined to a dark room where there's one or two people. This has unfortunately become an item of big business. I just recently read that they estimate at this point cyber crime has exceeded the drug trade, the illegal drug trade, in terms of the amount of money that's being generated. And you have to understand that if there's that amount of money, those billions to trillions of dollars involved, this is not just a group of people in a basement. They're turning this into full-on big business. And so we, as a global business community, need to act. And I congratulate every one of you for being here, because you're interested in learning something about what you need to do to protect yourself on a personal level and hopefully on a professional level. And on top of everything else, right now, this year, we've all raced into a brand new work landscape, a work landscape that unfortunately comes with a lot of baggage, and that is our remote workforces. Our remote workforces are using machines that in many cases were not part of the corporate network 1 year ago, that may not be managed by the corporate network, because we pivoted and we allowed folks to go to work from home with the least amount of effort possible. So with companies that had issued all laptops, well, that's great. They could take their laptop home, and now it's just a matter of, are we connecting securely? But that isn't the case for many organizations. Many organizations allowed folks to go and use their home computers, and they're using their Office 365 or Microsoft 365 now, and other tool sets to allow the staff to get into the business tools right off those home machines. Well, those home machines haven't been part of the security policies, and the cyber thieves know this. The cyber thieves have opened a whole new dimension of breaking into corporate networks by utilizing the weakest link, and the weakest link being unmanaged home computers. Right, so that's a little bit about the people who are doing it. Now, stories of what has transpired to help expand our thought processes into what can happen. So recently, digital industry has dealt with a number of different cyber break-in cases. One of the most recent is a CPA firm who just now, because we are just past October 15th, was working on filing the tax filings for this year for those persons who had asked for a 6-month extension. And as they went to file them, they were informed by the IRS, this return has already been filed. And it happened a number of times. It was very confusing to them. And then they realized that somebody had somehow gotten their client's information and was filing tax returns and giving a bogus tax return bank account where the money should be transferred to. In the case of the client that we're working with, we're not entirely sure yet because they don't know how many persons within their client base actually have had this happen to them, because they have some folks who they haven't filed for yet. So there could be more, but we're probably looking at something of under about a dozen, half a dozen, somewhere in that area. Now you'd say, okay, well, what's the tax return? What's the value of that? Hopefully they're only looking at a few $1,000s, and this is tragic. You know, remember, these people aren't filing legitimate tax returns. They're filing bogus tax returns. And so they're going in and saying, I take all these exemptions, and therefore I should have a $140,000 tax refund. And that was just one case. And they had potentially up to maybe a dozen more. And as it turns out, they were only a side target. There was another larger CPA firm, and they've already confirmed over 100 instances of false filings in their system. So you can imagine, if you do the math on that, this could have been easily well in excess of $1 million theft. And of course, the IRS is involved, but that doesn't change the risk to the businesses. So that's one example. Now that's an example that I honestly, if you'd have come to me just a few months ago, that was a direction of a type of theft through a bank account, or in this case, your IRS account, that honestly was not top of mind for me. That we need security to get into the systems that are used for filing these items is of course clear, and that's part of what we are always working with our clients to do. But this type of theft was not top of mind for me. A more common theft that we dealt with not too long ago was a business whose bank accounts were compromised. The client contacted us, let us know that there was something amiss, and we investigated what was transpiring. About the same time that we realized that their network had been wholly and completely compromised, we were told by the company that they had lost a few $100,000 out of one of their bank accounts. So unfortunately, they're recognizing that something had gone wrong and contacting us. This was a client that we did not previously have a relationship with. It was unfortunately too late. They were behind the ball when they realized that something was going on. And my third and final example is another. These are, by the way, are all Montgomery County businesses that I'm making, that I'm using in these examples. And the third and final is a firm who, again, had theft out of their bank account. They contacted us and asked if we could investigate and figure out how it transpired. And we came in, we did the forensics and the analysis through their corporate network, not a particularly large company, but at least it's not as, they have a lot of trucks on the road, but they didn't have a large administrative staff. So we went through the machines that make up their corporate operations and could not find a specific smoking gun on where this had transpired. And somewhere in those discussions, as we presented back the information and had a back and forth dialogue, we suddenly became aware that there was a home laptop that was shared between the business owner and his son. And that hadn't been part of the corporate scope of what we were investigating because it was not part of the office. And when that laptop was brought in and we analyzed it, we found the entry path that had been used to capture the information so that somebody could log into the bank account. I hope what these examples show us is that there are so many different dynamic directions, what we often call attack surfaces, that folks who are skilled at this cyber thievery are capable of using, that we in turn have to become equally aware on how to protect ourselves. And so therefore you'll see one of the first things we talk about are identifying what to protect, because you can't protect everything. So you're gonna have to make decisions. Then there's going to be a process that needs to be used on how much money will be spent, and specific areas that we're picking out this year, like our remote workforces. So for me, whenever we go into this process, before we can make any recommendations, or before you as a personal, on your personal level or at a business level, begin to worry about what should I do? What software should I use? How do I lock myself up? The first thing you should do is simply put together a list of what am I protecting? We do this instinctively and naturally when we're looking at things like, let's say, our cars or our home. When we are asked how many doors and windows do we need to put a security system onto, we instinctively know the answer to this because we count it out in our heads and we tell ADP or whoever the organization involved in is that I have 3 exterior doors, I have X amount of windows on the lower level, on the street level, and on the upper level. Right? Do you have that same process when you think about your IT security? So before we go off and just rush into buying software, let's talk about what do we need to protect. The next item then is evaluate your practice and how you've been using these machines. Where are they used? Are they commonly used outside the home, outside the corporate office? Are they commonly used when you're at a hotel, or you like to work periodically? Even in these pandemic times, you enjoy going out and taking a remote chair at a Starbucks or someplace where you can be out and about without being close to others. Or do you have a need to travel more frequently? Obviously, some of this applies more or less to the particular time we're in. This will help you identify where your vulnerabilities are, and then you can begin the practice of putting together your playbook. So one of the important things to always share with folks is cybersecurity is not a destination. The cybersecurity we're putting in place today will unquestionably have modifications by this time next year. An example of that would be right now we have, as of the end of this year, for government contractors, particularly those who are working for the Department of Defense, that they will have to adhere to a new standard. We likely have all heard of standards such as HIPAA, which your medical providers are supposed to comply with, which, by the way, has a terrible adherence policy by a significant percentage of health providers, unfortunately. The fines are growing. If you take a look at how doctors' offices and others who deal in that information are being treated, they were slaps on the wrist, and they're getting more stern about misbehaving and not putting in proper HIPAA processes. PCI compliance if we're handling financial transactions and credit cards. And now the Department of Defense contractors can no longer self-certify that they are adherent to the 800-171 NIST framework, but rather they're going to have to now be compliant with what's called the CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, done by third-party certifiers, such as Digital Industry is working on being, which is going to start now shortly. And the way that that's going to come into play is you have to show, if you're going to submit on any upcoming bids for the Department of Defense, that you are in fact CMMC compliant. So what I expect over time is that through various different outside influencing organizations, insurance companies, and the changing landscape, more and more is going to be required of all businesses, not just Department of Defense contractors, but all businesses. We always recommend that we start with a plan, right? And decide what it is that you need to protect. We assessed for that, and then decide, and what do I need to protect in that device? The next piece then is to use standards and or models that others have created. We're not charging down a road that hasn't been already traveled by thousands and thousands of others. We have a wide path. Somebody has already plowed these fields for us. So we shouldn't be charging in and trying to make up our own plans on how to do this. We want to use security models and standards, frameworks that already exist. In a non-regulated space where you don't have to have HIPAA or PCI or CMMC, what you have as the business owner is the choice of what do I choose to apply and not apply. And that comes back to where you feel the level of risk and what you feel is right for your organization. The important thing is that somebody within your organization should become knowledgeable, at least to the managerial level, of where money should or shouldn't be spent. Because again, if you're a CPA firm and your client's system, your system is violated and money is stolen from their IRS accounts, that may at the end of the day be a combination of responsibility on the part of Intuit or Lacert, who runs the cloud system that the CPA is working through. But those businesses will probably recover. If you're a CPA office, how many of your clients will have lost faith in you as an organization if this happens? So let's start with the knowledge. I've already tried to emphasize that. And if there's actually anything that's going to come out of what we're presenting today, I think I could almost, I've been tempted to say we should almost stop after the planning section, because really everything after that is logical. Because once you've made your plan, now all you're doing is putting together the different pieces. Now, I also want you to know when you say, wow, this planning, it's such a, you're asking me to plan a house and I don't know how to build one. Understood. We have at the end of this presentation for you a series of templates that you can download from Digital Industry that are going to be your soup starter to get yourself moving in this direction. And then, of course, you should engage your IT folks around you, whether it be Digital Industry or whomever it is that you have as that support. Feel free to use the soup starter to start a thoughtful conversation with those folks. Once you understand, have the knowledge and understand the risks, now we can begin to make thoughtful decisions on what's most important. Let's go with an example. You operate through a server who's physically still located in your office. You have chosen not to go to the cloud with that particular item. But your email's in the cloud, because most small businesses nowadays have that type of a setup. They may also have parts of the server function, like file services in the cloud through Dropbox or SharePoint or something along those lines. But in our example, for the moment, we're going to say that this is still on a server in the office, but the email and the calendaring system is outside the office. We've just switched to this remote workspace. And so now the question becomes, how is it that your staff is going to be able to work successfully remotely? Are they working on pieces of equipment that are corporate managed with all the security and the policies and the softwares like antivirus and malware, firewalls and encrypted connections back to the office? Or have they just been sent home, asked to log into Microsoft 365 and have basically been left to say, well, we put this together because we needed to have you start working from there, but is it time to rethink that now and think longer term? This isn't going away in the next couple of days. There's a good chance that a better part of 2021 will probably happen just like 2020 has, at least on the latter half of the year. So that's a year of exposure potentially that we really as business owners need to think a little bit about. And most importantly, do you have a response plan? So I wanted to double check an item. There's my response plan. I wanted to make sure I'd moved that up. We've put together 8 best practices. One were the cybersecurity policies. The cybersecurity policies will start with a network acceptable use. Again, you hear me talking a lot about putting together a plan and a structure, because how can we possibly protect what if we don't have an oversight of the systems that we need to protect? And then finally, what if our staff doesn't have the same understanding? So here's a simple example of what I'm referring to and what the network acceptable use policy helps to instruct. You have your staff working on devices that belong to your organization. So therefore, you don't have to worry about them working on home machines. And you know that you have already investigated the Microsoft 365 security, as well as secure VPN connections back to your office. Does your staff understand how to use those tools acceptably? For their own convenience, did they open up a Dropbox account? Do they know that that's unacceptable because it falls outside of the protections that you're putting in place? You, together with your IT services team or on your own, have created a backup structure, a disaster recovery system, but it is based upon recovering a physical server at your office, Microsoft's 365 email and file storages, but there is no coverage for the multi-cloud where you have more cloud usage than you realize. That they've started storing items into Dropbox because they had a personal Dropbox, and that personal Dropbox was also synchronized to their iPad. And it was easier to drag some of the corporate documents into the personal Dropbox so that it synchronized to the iPad because they wanted to read or do work in the car, and they wanted that flexibility. Well, kudos that they wanted to do the work, but they've just moved your corporate data into a format and a forum that is not within the acceptable use of the organization. And if you haven't specified that, then have they actually made a mistake? And that's one of the keys of what acceptable use policies, internet usage policies, password policies, social media usage policies are supposed to lay out. Now, many of these can be very, very boilerplate, but if you don't give the staff the level of guidance, then how do they possibly know what the expectation of the organization is? And of course, the same thing with bringing your own device, using your own device for corporate purposes.
Yes.
All of these items have to be, in fact, guided.
Hang on one second.
The next item,
I got a
I think we have one person off of microphone,
Okay, go
microphone
ahead.
unmuted. Please make sure you mute. So the next item is again in the planning phase, and then I'm going to move beyond that because I'm sure you guys would like to move on to other subjects, but you need to expect that something's going to go wrong. And when it goes wrong, you need to, again, make sure that your staff knows what they're to do. How are they to respond if you become aware that money was stolen out of the bank account? What are the steps that they should take? What if it happens to happen at a time when you are on vacation or you're out of contact on a client at a client site or otherwise, and they become aware that your bank account was compromised? What should they do? Who should they contact? And I can also say that these are nerve-wracking times. And if you have a guide that your staff can turn to and say, okay, number one is I'm to call the following branch manager. Number two is I need to send an email to all of the listed persons here within the organization. Number three is, and if you guide them through, then they're going to be able to respond. There are times, as was the case in one of the examples, that they noticed the issue was going on, and by having an effective breach response, they could mitigate the damages. A fourth example I would give of an organization that had $15,000, just under $15,000 stolen from their bank accounts. The way that the hackers did that was to do 3 transfers on just under $5,000. The reason that they did just under $5,000 is the people who did this realized that the $5,000 amount was a threshold of response and reporting for the banks. And by keeping it just under that and not trying to send one $15,000 transfer out, they effectively made it much harder for the bank to respond, and also changed the rules by which the bank has to respond, and also forced the bank to try to recover money from 3 different locations instead of 1 location. Now, the organization noticed what had transpired within 24 hours and was able to recover 10 of the 15. One local bank, who I will not name, refused to give the money back to the other local bank because basically their attitude was, and I have to say somewhat understandably, that's your problem. If I pull money out of this person's account, you're making it my problem because now I have to go to that individual and tell them why I pulled money out of their account. If that seems a little perverse, I have to agree, but it's the reality. Why does the second bank want to get involved with a problem that wasn't theirs to begin with? So now let's get to some of the meat and potatoes. We've done the planning. And the way that I like to approach after we've done the planning is to look at the way that the data flows. And often when I'm speaking about that, I tell folks, think of it as water flowing. Think of it as a set of pipes. Right? Where does the information come from? Where does the information go to? So certainly the first thing that you want to do is put up a good firewall between yourself and the rest of the world. And what the firewall is a device through which all traffic has to run a single choke point to get into, say, your corporate office or into your home. Now, who runs this firewall? I would say that there's probably, unquestionably, at least 90, if not 95% of persons, including those on this call, their home firewall will belong to Comcast or Fios. And so one has to ask the question, okay, if that's the case, can I trust that device? Because I was not part of the hiring process for the 10, 15, 20, 30,000 employees of Comcast, right, Steve? Nor was I involved in the hiring process of of the Verizon employees, but all of them at different levels, I shouldn't say that, different members of that staff can access that device. Okay, well, it's a cost to value item in the home network. I understand that. But our recommendation is that your corporate firewall not be operated by your telecommunications company, that it be a device that has been set up specific to the business for which it is protecting. It has intrusion detection, so it knows when folks are poking around. Intrusion detection is nothing more than the digital version of, there was some guy walking around the house this afternoon. I didn't recognize who it was. Why was he parked out front for 20 minutes and took pictures of our house? Right? That's intrusion detection. That's what your firewall needs to be telling you. Who is poking around, so that you have some knowledge, because with knowledge, you can mount a response or realize you don't need a response because they didn't do anything that would make you be worried in any manner. But at least you're aware that it has been transpiring. The next item is that behind that firewall, and possibly as a vehicle that firewall would help to create different network sections. In a small business environment, unlike in a larger corporation environment, it may not make sense to have one network section for the finance department, one for the operations department, one for HR. But certainly even in a small business environment, there should be segmentation of the corporate devices from the BYOB devices, i.e. the iPads and the Android and other devices that staff bring in and are allowed to use in a corporate level. Those devices should not be introduced into the same network as the corporate devices. And that's not hard to do nowadays. Those are very realistic bars that are not terribly expensive to cross. And in fact, as you go through that process, you could even then also create guest network where somebody who's a guest into your office would have internet access and again, not be invited into your corporate network. The next piece of this is, so we've restricted the traffic from coming in the firewall. We've segmented to make sure that only corporate devices are in the corporate network. But now we also need to restrict unauthorized application access. So what this means, and this is being done, I'm certain, for many organizations, not everybody has access into QuickBooks. Not everybody needs access into QuickBooks. And even within QuickBooks, you can limit the function of what, say, the bookkeeper role has versus the business owner. And the same should be done for all other applications within your corporate environment. Okay, I'm watching my time. I want to check real quickly. I think we are moving with 10 minutes left, so I'm going to move a little bit more rapidly so we could have a 5-minute wrap up at the end. So with network access, I've covered the different levels of access that we want to give. I've talked a little bit about restricting, not allowing everybody into every component. And remember that this is also from the perspective of, if your staff can't get into areas they shouldn't get into, then it's good for them. It shouldn't come from the perspective of, I don't let you in because you don't have the privilege to do it. I don't let you in because I don't want you to make an accidental mistake. What if a virus gets onto your computer? What if you accidentally click on a piece of malware software? Well, your computer can only go to where you as a user have privilege to go. So if you as a user don't have privilege to get into the financial folders, then those areas will not get damaged by, say, ransomware, encryption, or otherwise. One of the most basic and fundamental items is patching and updating. Now, I always advocate for thoughtful patching and updating in a corporate environment. We don't simply want to patch and update when Microsoft or Apple or others say, here's a new patch. That's fine for a home environment, but in a corporate environment, we need to think of line of business applications We need to think about the impact of line of business applications. The patch that's being offered may in fact not be critical to your environment. And so applying it may only create a problem where a piece of software no longer works the way that you expected it to. That being said, the city of Baltimore, the ransomware that they just dealt with this past year happened because they didn't patch and update. The attack method that was used wasn't even state-of-the-art current. It was older methods because they had older equipment that wasn't being maintained. And of course, while I say you need to plan and think about what you need to protect, all devices need antivirus and anti-malware. And that, by the way, also includes your Apple-based devices. If somebody has told you that those devices don't need that type of protection, you should question and discuss that with them, because I will assure you that any device created by a human being has mistakes and needs this type of protection. Disaster recovery and backups. Just like we defined what are the different segments of the network, how can folks get in, what does my Wi-Fi expose me to, we should also define what is our essential data and how do we back up the most critical data. Just because we're in a cloud system, does it provide the requirement of the backup that you need as a business? And the answer is one doesn't know if one doesn't investigate. What is the backup policy of a file lost in Microsoft 365 or in Dropbox? And I'll tell you this, both of them sell plans to do backups. So I promise you, if it was really a deep backup, they would be unable to sell their add-on product to back up your system. So it's not as deep as you would wish it to be. And then I asked the question, should we back up within the same system that we're already working in, or should we consider an alternative system? That way, if Microsoft is having a really bad day, at least you know your data is also safe at a secondary location. So do what we call a cloud-to-cloud backup. Again, we do this and we make these decisions based upon what's the appropriate tool set to be used. So how long can you be out of service? What we call the mean time to recovery. What data needs to be backed up versus nearline or offline. In other words, how quickly does one need to be able to get this information back? And it needs to be automatic. There is no value in having a backup system like we did 10 years ago, where we had to cycle tapes out and carry them off site. The times for that are gone, and I can't be happier for it. Because the biggest, let's say weak link in that chain was the human being who had to be involved with this process every single day. If we can set up automatic encrypted backups, so we know that if there's a fire or a ransomware attack, that your data will be able to be recovered, then we know that you're in a safe place. In the worst case scenario, it may take a couple of days. One of our work colleagues currently just went through a situation, I should say more correctly, their spouse went through a situation, large law firm with somewhere between, I can't recall now, 5 to 15 locations. And the ransomware attack that they unfortunately stumbled into just a couple of weeks ago shut the entire law firm down. I can't even imagine the amount of money that law firm is out when you have high-priced attorneys over 5 to 15 offices who can't work because everything is shut down. I think the second most important item for us to talk about is cybersecurity education. It has become a requirement, or if not a requirement, you can now often get discounts on your cyber liability insurance if you can attest that the company, your organization, is getting training, and this is going to be training that comes through an organization like KnowBe4 or other organizations like that also provide a certificate of training that you've gone through. You understand how phishing is executed. You understand how you need to look, how you protect yourself. Because at the end of the day, what is also a reality is that we're creating IT systems that need to be used by the user or they're valueless. But just like you give your son or daughter or a member of your family the car keys, if you give them the car keys, then they can go and have an accident. That's the same with any computer system or any corporate computer system. We have to give you access as users, otherwise it's a valueless system. But that means that the user can make mistakes. And that's even worse because you're being targeted. If you're a bookkeeper, if you're a financial organization, they're looking you up on social media. They're intentionally going after you because they know as a business leader, as a business owner, as a business director, as a financial manager, that you have the keys to the bank accounts. And so they're going specifically after you. And they don't even have to be in this country, as we know. We're connected to the most dangerous place in the world, the internet. So anybody can look you up from any country in this world or any state in this country, identify you, and know that you're the person who has access to the bank account. Okay, we talked a little bit about protecting your remote workforce already, so I'm going to move on quickly from this. But most importantly, guidelines of acceptable use and what tools should be used. Finally, that you have secure ways of accessing all of your data and that your staff knows how to use it. And go back and test it. I think last year, if you attended my presentation, I let everybody know that I was shocked when we did an audit that there were members of my own staff who didn't know how to access certain systems when they were outside the office. And they simply just didn't bother accessing them. Well, that's an operational problem, but I need them to access and access securely. Password lengths, basic item, terribly critical. Most importantly, though, no financial system that you're working with right now should not have a second factor authentication. And that includes the IRS, it would seem. You cannot have any place where you're accessing that doesn't have second factor authentication. You have to count on the fact that your passwords have been leaked or will get leaked. And insurance. I wish to tell you that I can stop everything, but it's just not going to happen. The organizations that are out there being cyber criminals are full-time employees at breaking into your account. You have a chamber to run, you have a business to operate, you have the line of business you're focusing on 9 to 5. Their 9 to 5 is to break into your account. So we need insurance just as you would with your car. And I'd also like to point out that in this last year, over this COVID period, the questionnaires we're getting from companies getting cyber liability insurance have become very pointed at the hygiene and health of the remote worker. So we're to the point of the recap. I won't bother doing so. I'm going to skip right on to the guidelines and I'm going to exit the conversation at this point. I believe we're top of the hour. I'm going to turn it back over at this point to Monica. And thank you guys very much for being in attendance. Please do come and download the various different checklists to help you move your organization to a thoughtful place. At a minimum, if something does happen, it is really good to be able to go back to the bank, the insurance company, and say we were following our essential cybersecurity checklist.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mark. That was a lot of really, really fantastic information that I think will help everyone be a lot safer. What would be, Mark, if anyone has questions or wants more information, what's the best place to contact you?
It would be fine to email. If folks would like to do so, they can call the office and set up a time for a telephone call or a Zoom meeting. That's absolutely always available. And also want to make sure that everybody knows that at this point, one of the many different things that we're doing this year to help the local community, besides putting on these types of presentations, is we'll do a 2-hour discussion with any business owner about where they are with their cybersecurity and or overall IT infrastructure at no cost, just to really get a chance for us, the beauty of that is we get a chance to meet potentially a new organization, and hopefully the beauty for them is that we'll be able to go over lots of different perspectives, not only on cybersecurity, but also simply on the criticality of and backup strategies for different cloud-based systems and otherwise, and also costs. We have over 100 clients that we service every year, so we have a really good finger on what the average market cost should be that a small business should be paying. So at this time, that's also hugely important, if I want to point out, because I think we're going into an economic period where all of us are going to have to tighten our belts a little bit and be very careful. So if we can save an organization money and therefore they're stronger, we believe that makes us stronger.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Make sure you check out our calendar at greaterbethesdachamber.org, as well as the calendar over at Greater Silver Spring for more upcoming webinars and events. And thank you so much, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great seminar.
Thank you, Jan.
Great as usual. Learn something new.
Good.